To be, to become, to begin, where the river leans to the sea. To learn, to let go, to love. The world turns endless, turning me. Oh.
Seed us with the question today. How you want to phrase it? Collective intelligence versus collective wisdom. Collective intelligence versus collective wisdom. Rory, do you want to give us a little seed into that lens into the shit show to see how we can unpack that together today?
Back to the shit show. I mean, so there's a lot of I'm loath to use the word hype, but a lot of people discussing collective intelligence and its potential and its use, including myself. Definitely over the past couple of years, this is something that has been very much top of mind for me. I've been thinking about it for probably a decade or something. But as you know, the AI and the GPT wave emerged, it became more relevant and is becoming more relevant due to just the capacity of AI to analyze and internalize the volume of data that will be needed, and being able to somehow play that back to us in a digestible form, making collective intelligence possible. What has been playing on my mind increasingly over the past definitely 6 months, maybe a year now, is the issue around collective wisdom. And the differentiation in very simple terms. If I need to differentiate between those two, collective intelligence can help us map out the paths forward. Collective wisdom is that which will help us choose the right path.
Yeah,
So
so I like that directionally. Let's first ground the terms. So what's the working definition for intelligence, and what's the working definition for wisdom for you? We don't have to go deep on those, but just that we have a clarification of terms.
So collective intelligence actually for me has kind of a double meaning. On the one side, it refers to intelligence in the sense of actionable knowledge, right? So the actual data having been processed into knowledge that can be used somehow. That sense of intelligence, right? And the other intelligence is then the kind of, let's call it the computational power, right? The ability to process different data streams in real time, more or less, right? And the collective intelligence then being the infrastructure and the essentially the coordination of individual intelligence nodes into something that is greater, and by extension then can process more data more quickly, more accurately, right? So there's process and there's let's call it output, and the output being the actionable knowledge. So there's kind of a duality on that side, and collective wisdom is still emerging in my head, right? I'll be perfectly blunt. So in terms of what collective wisdom looks like. It's, for me, kind of swirling around collective decision-making processes,
Mhm.
integrating and foregrounding voices from historically marginalized people, also indigenous wisdom, right? And the, let's call it, the infrastructure, and the kind of governance procedures to ensure that all relevant voices are included, and that the that the insights to be found in the everyday also play out, that our embodied wisdom or fascia, like all of this knowledge and insight beyond that which is purely left brain,
Mhm.
is harnessed and incorporated. Our gut feeling, intuition, all of this, a lot of the time it gets sidelined and sidetracked, and my desire to draw out this kind of collective wisdom angle, as a contrast to the collective intelligence, is born of that. So
Mhm.
two things: one, the embodied wisdom, and
Mhm.
two, the incorporation of marginalized and just everyday wisdom into the kind of structures that we are establishing, the new institutional frameworks that we're
Mhm.
building out.
Mhm. Okay. I will try to play back what I hear in a form that helps me think this through. And I think I might add another element to this, because
By all means.
intelligence and wisdom, but I think there's another element, and then maybe a encompassing notion. So what I'm hearing, essentially, intelligence is about the integration of information in solution sets, more or
I mean,
less.
we're specifically talking about collective intelligence then.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
But whether it's individual or collective,
Mm-hmm.
it's still the definition holds, right?
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And then it is worth exploring what that does that mean on a collective level. But intelligence in general is primarily problem solving capacity, where wisdom brings in directionality and depth, right? The integration of multi-perspectival data streams that then allow you to actually do this with purpose, in intent, depth, and direction, right? And then, which is hard for an individual already, right? Not even to talk about the individual. But then I would add a third category, which is more or less a given for us as humans, but also beginning to be diminished and almost non-existent on a collective level, which is sentience. Sentience being the sensory connectedness to the environment and to the self, which is the input into the intelligence, the data that the intelligence can use in order to do problem solving, and that wisdom can integrate into path and directionality, needs to come from somewhere. So sentience, right? We feel, we can take in our environment as an individual, but how do we do that? as a collective, right? And I think then the whole package of those three, collective sentience, collective intelligence, and collective wisdom, is a useful subset of what people generally point to when they say collective consciousness, right? So that whole package, breaking up in those three parts, becomes useful to me. What do you think of that?
I mean, I've definitely been bundling sentience in that sense under wisdom, right?
Under wisdom,
as you're describing it there. So this kind of what I was referring to as embodied wisdom, right? The experience of our environment and our willingness and ability to acknowledge and honor the insights that can be gleaned from that connection to ourselves, and not just in that kind of intellectualized sense, but in that embodied sense. So, I mean, for me, that differentiation is perfect. I mean, it adds that layer of or it's a more refined way of expressing that. But let's come back to the then just more specifically, and yeah, I mean within the broader umbrella of collective consciousness. Okay, I mean, we can probably bat that one around on its own for days if we really wanted to, but I don't think we really need to. I'd love to come back to the specific topic then of collective intelligence versus collective wisdom, and I'd love to hear your views in terms of how you have seen these kind of emerging over the past couple of years. How do you see the same differentiation or trends that I was at least attempting to describe a couple of minutes ago?
So I think so. If I purely look at problem solving capacity as on a collective level, as a definition of collective intelligence, I think we've done we have proven that we are really good at that, at collective intelligence. We have also in that process proven that we are very limited in our collective wisdom and sentience, because we solve problems on the collective level in a brilliant way, like these laptops that we're using to look at each other right now, for example, are a product of collective intelligence, but they're not necessarily a product of collective wisdom. And I have not seen much signal in the last years that tell me that collective wisdom is increasing in any way. To the contrary, and I think this is why the category of collective sentience is important, because our sensory apparatus as a collective has been separated even more than ever before, right? Meaning we now are 8-9 billion multi-sensors, if you will. But we're not in any way connected as deeply as we could, should, and have in the past, right? So it is really, really hard to integrate this this heterogeneity of 8 billion views into a perspective on a wisdom, collective wisdom layer that then can inform collective intelligence. So I don't know, it's a clumsy way of saying there is coherence, there's a lack of coherence and there's a lack of infrastructure that helps us sense on a collective level that allows us to have any meaningful integration at the moment. So I think we're really starved on that level. What are you observing?
Well, I mean, if you look at, take those trends that you've just put your finger on, right? And collective sentience, is just a reflection of individual sentience, right? Not purely just aggregated. That's not exactly how it works, but ultimately, through processes like we refer to as structuration, right, where institutions form through interactions of multiple individuals to form and perpetuate institutions. The individual level does get reflected at the institutional level, right, at the collective level. So the point around us essentially being increasingly disembodied, right, and detached from our natural organism in a way, right, and what that entails. I keep on looping back to a similar strand of thought is around this kind of Newtonian logic, right? This kind of mechanistic understanding of the world, but also of ourselves, right? And a kind of a detached understanding, and by extension, then relationship that we have. And that then, playing out at community level and kind of societal level, right? But I think definitely these types of processes have been accelerated over the past 2-3 decades, particularly through the development and the rollout of tech, and the intertwining of the kind of hyper individualized market environment that we live in, and tech which is increasingly designed to catch our attention and keep it as much as possible. That's what business models are built on, right? Making sure that our dopamine systems are primed and ready to go once they hear that the ping. On the one side, screens pulling our attention, and on the other side, then, as I say, just the more broad market dynamics around increasing individualization, consumption. I mean, we can go down that path too, but the efforts at self-realization through material goods, all of this is somehow interrelated, and are definitely blockers for each of us at the individual level, and then for us at a collective level to move beyond these patterns.
What I'm observing right now is that the lenses we have been looking through so far, I think, are typical for the place we come from, which is white, male,
European,
50-ish, right? Something like that.
Speak for yourself.
40-ish, 30-ish, whatever you are.
Young at heart, yeah.
But what would happen if we expanded the idea of the collective, right? So far, that has been limited to humans. But that's obviously not true, right? I mean, you're a collective of billions of microorganisms. Um, we only exist as part of a collective called life. And when we talk about collective intelligence and collective wisdom, that needs to be integrated, right? Otherwise, we will, and I mean that's basically the definition of the failure of collective intelligence is the limits of the collective. Because if you solve problems from a truly collective perspective called life, your problem solving will look different.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, we were getting into what I would refer to as ecologistic thinking,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
so a re-embedding of humanity within our ecological grounds, and how that then opens up these boundaries that you're talking about. That we break down these artificially constructed understandings of us and it when we're
Mhm.
talking about nature.
Mhm.
Um, and that is the ultimate goal, right? At least for me, that we overcome that dichotomy. Find our place again within the family of other manifestations of the cosmic stardust, right? Without wanting to get too far down that route, right? So whatever variant of kind of spiritualist, or even scientific spiritualist thinking you want to take on that you're absolutely right. The re-embedding and the deconstruction of those um, false dichotomies and boundaries that we have constructed for ourselves is a goal, right?
Mhm.
And potentially also the path, right? For how to live better, right? The issue that I see is that we are where we're at, right? And we have now got systems in place that, to my mind at least, keep us from um, achieving that level of re-embedding within nature, right? Both at a kind of a cognitive, but spiritual, and also physical sense, right?
Why?
This, hmm?
Why?
Why? I mean, we live. This is what people would refer to as the system, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Which I'm not necessarily a huge fan of monolithic terminology like the
Mhm.
system. But the system is uh, a very large assortment of institutional arrangements that we have established for ourselves to fulfill certain functions and to enable us to exist and live our lives without having to constantly reinvent and reinterpret absolutely everything all of the time, right?
Mhm.
So these institutions serve an important function, but a lot of the time we're not very good at unlearning. We're not very good at deinstitutionalizing when it would actually be more appropriate, right? We get stuck in path dependencies. Fossil fuel, fucking classic example, right? Like we're still burning that shit. We know it's not a good idea, but at the same time, you and I are talking on these laptops, and
Mhm.
that's taking electricity, and and all of that. So we have these institutions set up. We have the nation states. We have security as a huge issue, right? And the military industrial complexes that then build out around that. The dependence of the economies, definitely in the Western world, on those types of industries, the dependency of pension systems and other essential public services on a functioning economy, and all of these interdependencies, then built out as the system at that kind of meta level. They do, keep us ticking over, but they do also keep us on the wrong paths. That's
Yeah, I think, of course, it's a ratcheting up, right? You cannot simply step out immediately, because the first mover disadvantage of the stepping out of the current paradigmatic constraints is extreme.
Tell me about it. I can vouch for that. Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, it's very curious that whenever I have conversations with people across various demographic backgrounds, the notion of I don't need that much. What I need is some good people and some basics. But actually, I fully understand that that's what I need to have a fulfilled life, and not all the other stuff that's being offered to me out there. That understanding sits very, very present, apparently, for most people that I speak with. And I'm trying to look outside of my little bubble. And so what it tells me is that ultimately this is a coordination problem. If we all found out that the others are actually seeing the same thing that we're seeing, then we could start taking that step out of the current paradigmatic constraints in a concerted way. That's what I'm going to mean by collective sentience, right? Which is a shared understanding about what the world actually is, what it feels like, what it is that we need in a shared, coherent, yet pluralistic way. And that collective stepping out could then empower us to direct resources into alternative pathways to solve the material stack that we need for fulfilled life at the moment. So I think we need. In other words, there are nature-based solutions for almost every material out there that could be grown in regenerative ways rather than extracted. But these solutions are not being pursued at the moment because of their non-extractive nature, because non-extraction and growing in place means it's really hard to build extractive economic systems on top of that. So, and that then in turn, once those technologies are in place, can liberate even more people from the constraints of the current system into the collective sentience, and then slowly ratchet up the collective wisdom into something that puts us in a position of the apex custodian that we could be, rather than the apex predator on the planet. Does it make any sense?
Yeah, I've been wondering about this. Well, there's two things I've been wondering about. Yes, all of that makes sense. apex predator. We're no longer apex predator. We're like apex rapist. That's where we're at.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit brutal, but that's pretty much what's going on. We're as a species raping Gaia. And that's just really fucking bugging me. I don't like being part of that. So that's maybe drastic language, but maybe it's something that would be enough to shift people's mind on what the fuck are we actually doing here, people, right? The other thought that I had while you were speaking was like sentience related to ontology and like in ontological position, intelligence being like epistemological, and then wisdom. I was trying to come up with the technical term for it. I put in directional, but it's this kind of directional, moral, spiritual. I don't know. I'm struggling to get the right word to complete the triad there. But I think you get what I'm
Could it be
getting at there.
integration?
Integral. It needs an AL at the end, man. Like if we have ontological and we have epistemological, we need I'm get anal about my owls here, man.
Let's do.
Maybe wisdom is anal. Let's put it in as that for now. But I kind of like that. That differentiation. That for me makes it even more plastic, even more graspable in terms of what we're actually talking about here, and at what levels these shifts need to take place. And ultimately, what we're talking about is like community level resilience. Right? We're trying to figure out how it is that we can essentially provide people with that lived sense of agentic capacity, right? That irrespective of, and not agency, and I don't know if I brought this up the last time, but this is one that really bugs me. There's like this kind of, this word agency gets thrown around quite a lot. People need agency, and all this. I'm like, yeah, agency is a beautiful abstract term for a capacity to influence our environment and to have essentially kind of a self-determination, right? But I differentiate between agency in that kind of abstract sense and agentic capacity, in the sense of having the actual tools and knowledge that you need, right, and having them to hand when you need them, right? Like that's the basis of how I tick and what I'm up to is essentially trying to achieve community level resilience by providing people with a a solid subjective feeling of agentic capacity, that irrespective of what comes, we're going to be able to fucking deal with this. And if each individual feels like that, right, then the community is going to feel like that. And if that's the and if communities feel like that, then at the bioregional level or national level, but at kind of broader levels, that type of logic will play up. That's kind of how I understand it.
So you introduced now another angle into this, which is the community, which sounds very local. Whereas we're implying in the collective intelligence, collective wisdom, a global humanity level kind of thing. And I find it interesting to engage in a thought experiment around what you just said. Basically, the agency of the individual and collective in a bounded community system, where the community immediately senses, understands their impact on the environment, right? If you pollute the water in your bioregion, you will feel it immediately, so you won't do it. And therefore, you will find ways of solving your material stream issues in a way that you don't pollute your water, that you don't degrade the soil, that you don't, etc. Right? You keep the ecosystem intact as much as you possibly can. And that's if you start and then the integration over time of this leads to directionality, whether we want to call that wisdom or not. But you basically I've just recently learned that from Tyson. It's a very beautiful way to say our rules and regulations and structures come from the past, from our ancestors, and our ethics come from the future, from our from our children, grandchildren, right? And so we're at the point in which we can rewrite the rules and regulation to fit the ethics of the future better. Constantly. That's the 7th-generation story that some indigenous cultures hold, which basically says, okay, look 3 generations in the past and 3 generations into the future, and you're in the center of this. And your job is to integrate both directions. Right? That's basically that. And so let's to me, that's the closest agentic implementation of what we would call collective wisdom. Now, what we've lost as we grew the community from a small bioregional tribe of a couple of hundred or 1,000 people into billions of people on the planet is the sensory apparatus that tells us whether our ecosystem is still okay or not. Right? And so what is an interesting thought experiment to me is, where does that chain between the collective sentience, intelligence, and wisdom break? At what size of community does it break? And what do we have to add in order to actually be able to scale up beyond the Dunbar scale, 4,500? So what would it mean on a global level to be sentient of the ecosystem state of the planet? Right? If we can't answer that, then we can't get to collective wisdom.
So I worked in impact data for, well, it was impact finance, but my focus was on impact linked finance, right? So trying to really link financing conditions of individual investments and kind of fund structures to impact data. And, you know, it's led me to a kind of a couple of realizations around this. On the one side, we don't have enough impact data around some things, right? And on the other side, we just don't collectively have enough interest, basically. Like our collective sentient capacity is actually much, much greater than that which gets exercised. Okay? So when you ask, you know, what is it that we would need to add in order to, you know, move from where we're at now to somewhere better, I would argue we don't need to add anything. We actually need to take away. We need to slow down. We need to, it's not the and more logic. It's the but less.
It's a valid question. So there is a pull that I think everybody in our bubble is sensing towards being grounded in place, being in community, basically caring for the people and caring for the land where you are.
Caring for life.
Yeah, caring for life in place, right? Now there's an opposing tension towards being in conversation, in communion with people beyond that place at the same time.
Yeah. And sorry.
No, and that is where I think we haven't solved things.
So
yeah, go ahead.
like my point here would be that we actually have, like, what I was trying to get at is that this concept of Ada, or I guess Amit Paul, right?
Yeah, I know Amit.
Okay, I mean, told a story last year at an event that I was at, and he introduced this word Ada, and basically it means we have all that which we need, and we do, right? We have the tech stack to do exactly what you're talking about, right? It's not a matter of having more. It's about a matter of slowing down and taking a look at what we have and taking a look at what we actually really need and bringing those two together, right? And just reconfiguring. It's not about building more or new or better or faster. It's really just about sitting down and convening. Coming back to the point that we were, making earlier, convening with ourselves first, right, and ensuring that we have internal coherence. And once we have a little bit of that, then being able to look at the community level and the coherence there, and then the community of communities, right? And the tech stack that we need, the data we need, we have, basically everything that we need is there. It needs some resources to do that reconfiguration, right? But I think one major thing will be moving beyond the screen, right? Moving beyond tech that is screen based, and tech that is driven, tech development processes that are driven by profit motives. I think those are two things that will massively help us. And once our attention, our capacity to sense both internally and externally begins to increase, and hopefully there's a parallel process of greater appreciation of the types of wisdom that have been overlooked for many years. And I think more or less globally, definitely female wisdom has been largely downplayed, right? And the kind of female energy has been quashed far too often, and leaving more space for that emergence, for that openness, and not always thinking that we can just dominate and manage everything, right, by having more and bigger and stronger. And
that's actually a good one. Maybe you should start womanaging instead of managing.
Well, this thinking of managing, it's like, I can plan my way out of this. I can design bigger and better. I can design smarter, so that the systems that I create are then able to manage this complexity. But in doing all of that, you're adding to the complexity the whole bloody time. right?
Of course.
So you can't get there, and then it ends up. And you mentioned Tyson a minute ago, and it reminded me of a different words of wisdom from a different Tyson, and that's Mike Tyson, right? And it's everybody got a plan until they get punched in the face, you know.
Yeah, it's my
And
favorite food. For that.
exactly, and it's like we can't like plan and try to dominate and shape everything forever, right? In
This is
doing so, we're just messing shit up.
this is why wisdom is so crucial, because the only thing we can do with a complex system and future is somehow coordinate dispositionally a direction. That's it. There's no managing in this. Absolutely, I fully agree, and that's where the wisdom part for me on the collective level begins. Now, the other term that that Amit mentions, I agree that the entire stack is in existence, and it is in existence in a way that it doesn't satisfy the exploitation requirements of a capitalist economic system, and therefore it doesn't receive the resources to reach the people that could then start using those new material, for example, pathways, but also other pathways, to replace the current way we do laptops and such, so that they're actually in tune with life. And it's I need to go back to that tension, the tension between the local, in place, communal, and the global. Right, as right now, if we want to have sexy laptops to look at each other through, then we need that global machinery at the moment. And right now, it feels like there's a question. Either we have that, the sexy laptops, or we have a very rudimentary kind of life, right? No tech. And a question that arises there for me is, what is the modality that we need to employ to be able to bridge the resource gap so that the life-serving technologies can be in place and be in global conversation to put those new material, nature-based material resources into sexy laptops while staying in place?
I mean, for me, that's the commons. That's the global commons. Like that's having a globally, communally owned and stewarded resource base that is universally accessible, right? This includes IP, this includes designs, this includes, tech of all sorts, right? I don't mean tech is in silicon. I mean tech also is in social tech and, right, etc. And having all of those available online, what gets referred to, the sexy term at the moment is cosmolocal, right? That it's universally available, but then gets localized. And that's something that, I think if you ask me, the next wave of tech is definitely going to be spatial web tech, right? It's going to be 3D as opposed to 2D. And I think what we're going to be able to see there is moving beyond the screen to like wearables and stuff, which doesn't maybe sound like anything fantastic, but you know, it has the potential to really unlock a lot of attention, right? That is currently being dragged away. And the last thing I wanted to just flag is this capitalism isn't the issue, right? Like capitalism as such is agnostic, right? The capitalist system is a means. It's a machine. It's an engine, right? The point is that the ghost in the machine is fucked, right? We're stuck in an economic growth led development paradigm, right? Which promotes extractive logics, right? So the capitalist system per se doesn't need to necessarily be chucked overboard or whatever. It's the ghost in the machine that needs to shift, right? And that starts with us.
Okay, so there are now 3 big complexes that I'd like to address. I don't think we'll have the time for all of them today, but let's just put some
markers
pins
in the ground. Yeah, I like it. Do it.
So one is the technological evolution. One is the capitalist system and markets, and the third is the feminine perspective. To me, these are 3 really
awesome.
important.
Do the 2 middle-aged white dudes get to talk about the feminist side? All right, good.
Yeah, maybe
feminine.
Should bring in some women and just listen to them for a while.
Why would we do anything sensible like that, man? Come on, we might learn something.
Yeah, that's why I'm reluctant to go into that actually. But maybe we can do a round and learn something from some women. It's actually fun. But I want to tackle the capitalist thing first, because I think it's just we have to dissect some terms. I think we're actually seeing the same thing, but I strongly disagree that capitalism isn't the problem. And I'm going to, for a starter, going to invoke Tyson once more, because in the conversation we had, he really, in his unique way, pointed towards the problem with the ghost in the machine. We're talking about the invisible hand, and he's like, "Yeah, but what if the hand's not a hand? What if it's a cock?" And yeah, so and it's behaving like that exactly. So, but why is it behaving like that exactly? It is, so we have to distinguish between capitalists or capitalist system and a market system, right? And the capitalist system is a implementation of a market system that is geared towards maximizing financials.
No,
profits.
it's not. And like, this is where, this is where we are, definitely, like, capitalism as an institution, it refers to, like, in a technical sense, right? I mean, it's based on the term capital, okay, which refers to primarily financial resources that can be invested in different ways so as to coordinate, right? That's essentially, it's the capital is a value holding representation, right? A social construct which is used to coordinate and manifest the desired results of the people that are doing the investing.
Okay. So to me, a forest or a beehive or you are markets. In that exact definition that you were describing, minus the financial, right? There are signals in those markets. There are multiple signals in those markets, and those signals in their totality with all of the actors in that market system called Rory make sure that that entire system continues and stays healthy. Now, none of these, neither the market called Rory or the forest or a pond or a beehive, have any use for financial signaling at all. Zero. So, and that is a capitalist system is a abstraction of a market based in financial flows. And financial flows are defined by the architecture of the finance, of the money you're using. And if that is flawed, which it is, then your whole market system is flawed. That's one critique. The other critique is, if you only had one type of signaling function inside of your body, only dopamine or only serotonin, you would not function. It wouldn't be possible for you to function. You need a plethora of appropriate signaling modalities, local, global, intermediate, function-based, etc., to integrate the whole system called Rory into a functioning thing. That's the second critique of the capitalist system, because it only accepts one type of signaling function, which is money, in essence. And it wants to abstract everything else down to that one signaling function. That is why the capitalist system as such is flawed, broken, and a problem to me. The market, a market is not, right? A market is what we're actually talking about, that is integrating multiple signaling functions into a coherent loss function, to coherent optimization, that it means keep the system alive. Right? So, and in that distinction, I would say, fuck capitalism.
Again, I just have a different understanding of what capitalism is. Like, all you're talking about in terms of which signals get paid attention to and which don't, and which get integrated in decision-making processes and which don't, right? The nature of money as it has manifested within this capitalist system, et cetera, they're all mirroring the ghost in the machine, and the machine is agnostic. Like, the capitalism and money and the capitalist versions of markets, right? As you're talking about, they only, they're institutions, right? So they are perpetuated. They're populated and perpetuated by people, right? And as such, like, if I have a phone and I use it to call somebody, it's a communication device. If I have this phone and I smack somebody over the head with it, it's a weapon, right? And capitalism is the same, right? It's a tool. It's just fucking something that's there, and we're using it in a really fucked up way. I completely agree with you. And as such, the systems are functioning in a completely, like, extractive and self-destructive manner. But those are representations of the logics that we are feeding into it, and not inherent within the structures that are capitalism per se.
I still disagree, because while that system is made up of institutions and people that all have some form of signaling capacity, the entire signaling capacity is concentrated on very few actors inside of that system, which
Yeah, but now you're ascribing inequality as an inherent characteristic of capitalism, and it's not. Like you
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
could.
an inherent characteristic
It is
of
not. It
capitalism.
doesn't need to be. It's not necessarily the case that has to
So,
be
so,
so.
so, 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 how describe a capitalist system that does not produce inequalities?
So again, we're coming back to the what is capitalism? For me, capitalism is a set of structural mechanisms, right, that facilitate the flow of resources.
Mm-hmm. That's a
Okay,
market. To me, that's a market.
the market, yeah, with capital specifically needs to have some kind of currency running within it, right? A market doesn't necessarily have to. Okay, it could also run on barter. Right, there's some
And
kind of
smiles, like love.
value
Yeah.
exchange, exactly, of some
Mm-hmm.
kind, right? So
Mm-hmm.
where there's some form of transaction taking place, you can refer to it as market. When there's like this financial component baked in, right,
Mm-hmm.
then we're into this kind of capitalist system. I've worked in innovative finance for the past decade. Like, it's my learning out of that is that the financial markets aren't in and of themselves sociopathic, right? They are agnostic and they don't generate inequality. We do. We generate inequality through how we use those tools, right? If we chose actively, right? If people at the top, right, actively chose to invest their resources in a way that promoted equality, right, and they refused to take any returns on investment until everybody had reached their standard of living, okay, then it would eradicate inequality. They don't, I agree with you, but that's not because of the system and its inherent qualities. It's because of how we're using that tool.
Well, if the system and the actors and their behavior, to me, are symptoms of the system. Therefore, if there's an accumulation of power in a few actors, and those few actors then behave in a way that is detrimental to the entire system, that's a system failure. So, to me, there needs to be something built into the system that prevents this from happening, right? And it's not. And that's why that capitalist system is broken and flawed, because it doesn't have any inherent mechanisms that prevent this from happening.
You
And
are dead right there.
and
Currently.
okay, so there's one way I could agree with you that there is a form of an implementation of a capitalist market system that has the potential to not be totally fucked. And that would be one where we completely redefine what money means, how money is created, and how money goes away. And then we could say, okay, this is a market system that is driven by abstracted signaling functions called money, finance, and capital. But we are the conscious designers of these in order to create the systemic equilibrium that is required for the long-term survival of the system itself, right? In that case, I would agree with you. Right now, in the current flawed monetary system, which is rooted already in the exponential growth of money itself and the backing mechanisms of that exponential growth, it's completely impossible. Entirely.
I
There's no way to
completely
fix it.
I completely agree with you. Like, don't get me
Okay.
wrong. I'm not.
So
I'm not saying that we should have capitalism in its current form.
so okay. So and then if we say okay, we need a diverse portfolio of signaling functions that we can then encapsulate in money that behave differently based on their function, their radius, their general scope, like the different signaling functions in a human body or in a forest. And we call that system capitalist system, then I would agree with you. But I think, or maybe it is not even necessary to do that.
So
Right?
the reason that I hang up on this one, and
Mm-hmm.
if anybody's actually listening to this, yeah, so that you know, we're at least I generally try to avoid engaging in pure intellectual masturbation, right?
Yeah, yeah.
The reason that I hang on this one is because we do live in the capitalist system,
Mm.
okay, and we will need to evolve beyond it, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to evolve beyond it, we need to have a nuanced understanding of what it is we're actually dealing with. Okay. And
True.
that's why I dig around in this so much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And pull it apart, okay, in its different ways, and also put my finger on the fact that it's not it's the capitalist structures per se are agnostic, right? And the reason that I really hammer on that is because at least the part of them, they can be partially used, right? If and when we can shift the ghost in the machine in at least parts of it to to help us build the bridge to
Mm.
the next economy.
Okay. Now we're in sync.
Yeah.
Um, the So I fully agree, and I might have shared that story with you before. So stop me if I do that. Have I spoken about Bernard Lietaer?
That I don't know.
Okay.
But you've got
So,
like
but
3 minutes. So
I'll
go ahead.
go fast. No,
Oh no, I don't have a hard stop.
you don't
We
have a hard stop. Okay, we have some more time.
have like
I think,
15.
about half an hour more. Okay, 15. I'll do a quick one on Bernard, and then we can maybe anchor something for our next conversation in those 15 minutes. But Bernard was the head of the central bank in Belgium before he was the architect of the introduction of the euro. I met him in
Yes.
2003.
Time
Uh,
banking.
yeah, time banking is one aspect, but
Oh,
Bernard had um, uh, essentially taught me everything I know about money. So that's the first. And the story he liked to tell was there was a problem in the city of Ghent in Belgium with a part of town with undocumented people. And because they were undocumented, they didn't have jobs. And then there was this whole negative feedback loop attached, or positive feedback loop attached to that, of substance abuse,
yeah.
violence, desolation, etc. Nobody knew how to help those people. So he was called by the government and asked the people, what do you dream of? What's your dream? And they said, we dream of a little piece of land. So he got a piece of land from the city, made it accessible by rents through a currency he invented that could only be earned by doing nice things in a neighborhood. And then in next to nothing, the neighborhood lifted itself out of the rut. And when the environment changes, people change, and people started getting themselves legalized, and everything started working out. Out of that, he extrapolated his big life dream, which was a central bank of dreams. Essentially saying, okay, you deposit the Rory dream in there, and Thomas walks around somewhere and does something in the world that's makes Rory Dream more real. So Rory token is created, and I get some of that, but nobody accepts Rory token, right? Because only so many people know Rory. But it doesn't matter, because if everybody's in the business of fulfilling their own and other people's dreams, maybe what's left to do is clean your toilet, but everything else is cared for, because there will always be people who find joy in teaching or building a home or putting clothes on people or feeding people, etc. Right? So the most important basic functions are solved. And actually, Forrest Landry did some math around this. He reckons that 1,000 people in the community should be sufficient to have all of the necessary inputs at sufficient levels. And now I'm seeing that I do have a hard stop. I thought the hard stop was in half an hour. But I think we have put in some anchors. So maybe we can manage in the next conversation to pick up on the question of a functioning market, however we want to call that, capitalists, whatever. What's the signaling in that market? That's interesting, very interesting to me. And yeah, I don't know. What do you feel?
I think there's a lot to process there. You know, we also mentioned, tech evolution, and feminine energy inclusion, right? And these
for that one we should be the listeners. That's it.
We should be the listeners indeed, but they are interrelated. I mean, the inclusion of female energy is a signaling thing, and the signaling influences tech evolution. So
okay,
I'll give Ida a call.
Yeah, and Samantha, and a bunch of others.
All right, let's do it.
All right, thank you so much, man. And looking so much forward to the next one.
Indeed. I mean,
see you soon.
Peace out.